Right there, Scooby-Doo. You cute one. Hi. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another... Excuse me. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another art video. Today I am going to be showing you a kind of speed painting of one of the first digital paintings I've ever done. Now, I used to kind of dabble in this a little bit using Photoshop and a really old graphics tablet back when I was like 18, 19, something like that. Wasn't a great graphics tablet, it was like a £20 one. I struggled with it a bit, it had a lot of issues, and Photoshop probably wasn't the best program to be using with it, but it got my creative juices flowing a little bit back then. And in recent years I've been seeing a lot of people use an iPad and Procreate, and I was like, I really want to try that. Really do. So I saved up for many months, and I bought myself an iPad on sale, and I got the Apple Pencil as well, and I got Procreate, which, oh my god, how is that program like £8? It is amazing. I'm very impressed. I didn't expect to like it as much as I do. Wonderful. And I have been teaching myself how to digitally paint things. And today I want to share with you my first ever digital painting. I'm going to be talking you through the process of kind of like what I did, what I learned, where I need to improve, what I liked about it, what I didn't like about it, and that kind of stuff. So I am using one of my own photographs as kind of like a reference and a base for this image. It's one of my photos I took of mushrooms in Bramley Fall Woods when I was there with Kyra and one of my friends a couple of months back now. If you'd like to see more of my photographs, you can over on my website. It's just racheloates.uk, and there's tons of photographs and art and poetry and all sorts of stuff over there. But I guess I just kind of like want to make it clear that like I did end up kind of like tracing certain elements of my original photograph because I wanted to focus more on like the painting style and getting used to the brushes and getting used to the like active digitally painting rather than actually thinking about the drawing itself for now. So please bear that in mind. Like in the future, obviously I want to like properly draw things out by hand as I would with any other drawing, but for this one I thought it would be easier to just use the photograph to kind of like give me the base shapes and elements to work with and then go from there. To save a little bit of time, to not overcomplicate things, to not overwhelm myself was a really big thing, and I think this is okay. I think sometimes in art, taking certain shortcuts here and there so you can focus on a different skill that you want to learn is absolutely fine. You only have so much time in the day, and you only have so much energy in the day as well, and sometimes you need to focus your efforts in different areas, and that's absolutely fine. So with that in mind, I'm going to switch over to the like speed painting time-lapse footage that Procreate recorded of my little mushroom painting, and I will talk you through that. Okay, so this is the photograph that I'm working from, and this is one, like I said, that I took in Bramley Fall Woods a couple of weeks back with Kyra, and these are some kind of field cap mushrooms, I think, and I just love this photo. It's probably not my favourite photo I've ever taken, obviously, but I quite like the composition. I think it makes for a really kind of like interesting sort of painting. They're all kind of the same mushroom, but at different stages of its life. I like that there's some green in the background. There's the brown at the bottom, and then the bright yellow white mushrooms kind of popping out. I think that contrast is really nice. I think the composition is quite nice. I think the way the mushrooms are growing and how some of them are kind of tilting to the side, some of them pointing the camera. You can see the different areas of the mushroom, the caps, the gills, everything. So I really like this. I think it shows off all the different parts of the mushroom nicely, and that's kind of why I wanted to paint this. I've actually painted this in watercolour as well. And this was one that was like from an original sketch, so that one like wasn't traced or anything like this one's going to be. And I like it. I think it turned out okay, but it needs some work. Next time we're going to do more work. Anyway, let's get into drawing this. So obviously this was my first time using Procreate, and I had no idea what I really wanted to use in terms of brushes, textures, anything like that. So it all started with a lot of sort of trial and error. I ended up for the outline using this kind of like textured pencil type brush, which I do really like, and I think it gave a really nice effect. It wasn't too harsh of an outline, so it didn't really look cartoony, but it still kind of gave me something nice to work from. It was a nice solid base, a good starting point. It did mean, however, I couldn't kind of just drag and drop colours to fill because there were gaps in the lines. But I don't mind that so much because I wanted this kind of more softer approach to filling. I didn't want solid colours on here. I kind of wanted to build up layers and textures with different brushes, and I used a lot of things like air brushes and sort of spray brushes and textured brushes on here to build up these different layers of texture. You can see that's kind of what I'm doing here. For the background, I start to kind of like use the blur tool a little bit and sort of add Gaussian blur to certain layers, and I started like you know, smudging things around to kind of create this more kind of wishy-washy look, and then going back in and adding other textures. So one thing I did really enjoy painting were these little gills, and I found the iPad pencil was really, really useful for this because you can control your pressure. So I could create these sort of like lines that tapered off, and then like with layering dark colours and medium tones and light colours on top of that, you did start to really kind of like create depth and texture, and it did look, well, I think a little bit in places anyway, like these were genuine gills that had like folds in them and shadows and stuff like that. I could have, on this left hand mushroom, I could have been a little bit more consistent with my sort of gill placement, I think, but again, that's something to work on in the future. I started using speckling kind of brushes for this little round mushroom down here to create textures in this, but I don't know, I kind of felt like it wasn't working. I wasn't too happy with him, so I kind of kept leaving mushrooms and coming back and working on other things and so on. You can probably see I was also doing like a lot of masking at this point as well, and kind of over painting and then removing bits, so kind of like hiding, like either erasing or using a mask to kind of like outline certain areas. I wish I'd used the masks more actually. At first I just started like erasing bits because I was like, oh, it's fine, I won't need to do this too often, and I was like, no, actually I do. You'll also see kind of like, as I'm doing these stems here, I kind of had one technique for doing these stems that I kind of liked, and then later I went on and did like a different technique and preferred that, so I came back to these and ended up editing it, which was really, really nice. This is what I love about digital painting. It's so versatile because, you know, the erasing's so much easier. If you don't like something, you can undo it and try it again. If you try something better, you can just, you know, take something off and then go back and redo it differently, and I really, really liked this. The wood I found was a little bit difficult because like I didn't quite know how dark to go without making it too dark, and I wanted to make sure I was like adding in some highlights in here, but I didn't want it all to just be the same tone and kind of blend into the mushrooms too much. And this is just kind of like an art fundamental rather than a digital painting thing, so this was something that kind of took a little while to get my head around. But again, I feel like you have much more versatility in the colours you can use and a wider choice of colours that you can use when you're doing digital painting rather than traditional art, because sometimes, you know, you might be like, oh, I really need like a really dark colour here, but you only have 8 pastels and you don't have the darkness that you need. Or you might be like, I really want to get like a bright white out of this, but you know, you don't have the right pen, pencil, paint, whatever. Do you know what I mean? With traditional art, you are limited by your materials and kind of what you can afford and what you have available to you, what you can carry with you, any of these things. But with digital art, you have this whole colour palette there the entire time, and it's very freeing. It could be a little bit overwhelming as well, but I did find it mostly quite sort of freeing. It was really nice as well. What I enjoyed with this was like zooming in and working on really small tiny parts at a time, and then zooming out and seeing the whole picture come together, and it was just very, very satisfying. It was very nice. I did like that. There was lots of kind of going back and looking at the photo and comparing and, you know, trying to make sure I was on the right track and I was keeping the overall like tone right. It's like I zoomed in and did all these tiny details, but then if you zoom out and you can't really see them, you kind of think like, well, what's the point? Is there any point to this? But then the good thing about that is you can kind of like hide and show different layers, so you can see if they're actually making a difference or not, so you can kind of flip back and forth and compare and that sort of thing. This mushroom at the bottom was actually a nightmare to paint. This is the one that I struggle with the most. The one that's kind of like rotting and half eaten and really, really dark because he's at the end of his life and he's facing the camera and he's got all these holes in him. That was difficult. I still don't quite know how I feel about how I pulled that off, but he was a tough one. Whereas this white mushroom at the front, I love doing the little bits of shading on him, the really, really brightest white one. I think he's gorgeous. I love the texture that I got on the top of him because of the brushes that I used. Like I say, I love these like little like shading bits I did to create this sort of very subtle, smooth little bumps and stuff. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. At this point though, I was getting more into like creating the texture of the wood, so these branches started coming a little more easily and I really enjoyed it. These, I think I kind of drew more like they weren't on the original photograph, if that makes sense, so these were kind of more just elements that I threw in to add a little bit of interest and kind of, I don't know, make the image more interesting. You'll also notice a random bit of wood appeared there a couple of seconds ago, and that's because I copied one of the pieces of wood from the bottom right corner, and I flipped it and I moved it and I made it smaller and I chucked it in the background. So yes, I kind of reused an element and then I reshaded it. But you know, that's one of the kind of fun bits of digital painting, isn't it? You can do little things like that and save a little bit of time if you need. And then for the background, I had no idea what I wanted to do, because obviously the background for the photo is kind of, the focus is very soft, the depth of field is quite narrow, but there's still a lot of detail there. You just can't really see it. So I was like, how the hell do I show this in a painting? And this is one of the things I really struggled with the watercolor. I feel like I didn't get that kind of background and the floor looking kind of realistic enough. I don't think it quite looked fully like a forest floor. So I was thinking of like different options I could do and like drawing things out, and I tried a few different things. And then I discovered that Procreate has like not only an amazing selection of brushes in terms of art material, but it has brushes with things like leafy textures and plant textures, and you can kind of like play around with them and like layer ones of different opacities and different colors, and then like apply different blending options to different layers. And I played around with that and created this really, really fun, cool, kind of quite deep, I guess, background. And I really like how it turned out. It felt almost like cheating a little bit using some of the different brushes, but at the same time I was like, well, no, I'm just kind of using the tools at my disposal. So it's not like I just stamped them on there and then left them. Like, a lot went into it. And then the last step was just kind of trying to go in and add in some highlights and some shadows and that kind of thing. And honestly, this was the bit that I struggled with most, because I was trying to make sure the mushrooms stood out from the background enough, and that there were enough tonal differences, but that I didn't just make the background dark and black so you couldn't see any of those little details in the texture that I put in there. I was also trying to think about like the lighting sources and where the lighting was coming from, and you know, add in shadows and highlights there, and it was difficult. Again, this is an art fundamental rather than like something specifically to do with digital painting, but it was tough. I've never done quite such a complicated painting with so many elements, so figuring out the light source in something like this was tough. And normally I do more of an illustrative style anyway, so I don't quite have to think about that to the same extent as I did here, and it was hard, and I do think I could have done better. But the great thing about doing it digitally was that I got to try out lots of different options, and when I didn't like it, I just erased it and started again. And so yeah, this ended up being the finished piece, and I'm generally really, really happy with it. For a first digital painting, I am very proud of it. I love it. I think it kind of captures, I don't know, the joy and excitement I felt of that day in the forest. And I think it shows my love of mushrooms, absolutely. I think it gave me a chance to try out lots of different new techniques and tools, and just kind of experiment and figure out what I like doing and what I don't in Procreate. And honestly, I'm quite proud of myself. Like, I know that's a silly thing to say, but I'm like, yeah, I made that. Obviously, I think there are definitely things I can improve on. I think there are a lot of more advanced tools and techniques in Procreate to experiment with and use that I haven't been using, but I'll probably find some tutorials and try them out and follow them along. And I think generally, in terms of my art skills, making sure I'm like actually drawing from scratch is going to be a big step forward and it's going to improve my work. And I think working on understanding light and shadow and, you know, where those light sources are and stuff like that is also going to be a big, big improvement for my work as well. But for a first attempt, I'm really, really happy and I really enjoyed it. And honestly, I cannot wait to do more digital painting and just try more of these and get better and improve and just have a lot of fun. Like I say, I'm really, really enjoying it. I loved using Procreate because I think it's a tool that's very deceptively simple on the surface. It's very easy to pick up and get kind of used to the basics. But then when you start kind of diving in a little bit deeper, it's got a lot going on, and I think you can get quite advanced if you want to, and I'm excited to explore more of that. I loved using the iPad and Apple Pencil. Again, very easy to pick up, very intuitive. The Apple Pencil was so smooth to use. It felt like you were using an actual colouring pencil at times, and you know, you could like use different pressures and get different like opacities and widths and all sorts, and I loved that. It felt very, very natural. But yeah, that's probably about me done, I think. Let me know what you think of this painting down in the comments, please. So there you go, that is my finished painting. Thank you so much for watching this video, and thank you for being here today. I really appreciate you guys watching my art videos and supporting this like fun little passion project of mine. It's something I do just because I enjoy it and I love it. But if you'd like to check out my kind of main channel content where the bulk of my time and effort goes into You Can Do. It's just Rachel Oates. There's book reviews, there's science, history, education, pro-LGBT, feminist stuff over there, just a bit of everything really, and lots more of my little doggo Kyra, who's down here snuffling at my feet, aren't you? Oh, she's so good. So if you're new here, remember to subscribe, like the video, comment for engagement because everything helps, and also go check out my main channel. Thank you so much for watching today, and I'll see you guys again really, really soon.